A lot of men have subconscious behavior patterns that are completely sabotaging their entire life. These patterns are drying up your sex life. They're making you feel shy and timid, making your dating life miserable, keeping you from getting anywhere in your career, and basically finding any real satisfaction and success in life. In this video, I'm going to break down these behavioral patterns that are basically drying up men's sex lives and show you how you can break free from this, even starting today, to dramatically transform yourself at a core level. I'm Jonathan White. I've helped thousands of men from around the world learn to master their sexual energy and create an epic life. Make sure you hit subscribe to stay notified when new content like this drops. And make sure you get my free ejaculation control ebook through the link in the video description of this video. It will teach you how to massively up-level your game in the bedroom. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I was running into a dynamic in my relationship. Currently married, I've been in a long-term relationship with an amazing woman for 8 years now. And a few years into the relationship, in fact, it wasn't very far into the relationship where some issues started to arise around a lack of sexual desire on her end. And me being the sexual kung fu guy, it was really humbling for me. It was a big blow to my ego because I've got the sexual kung fu ability, baby. I can have non-ejaculatory orgasms. I can control my ejaculation. But my partner wasn't having sexual desire for me. This was obviously very frustrating. And of course, one of the first things that came to mind for me was, well, there's probably just something wrong with her. She just doesn't have the sex drive that I have. I need to find someone else. But as I dove more deeply into why this was happening, I started to realize that it wasn't that she had some sort of sexual dysfunction, it was that my behavioral patterns, the dynamic I had in the relationship, was killing her desire, killing her attraction for me, and causing her to feel that I was more of a friend than a man that she was in a relationship with. And so once I started to implement what I'm gonna share with you in this video, there was a night and day difference in my relationship. Not just my relationship with my woman, but my relationship with other people in my life. My ability to lead myself, my ability to act and lead other men as I'm doing men's work in this world, working with men all the time. Being able to really step up into my purpose, step up into my boldness, deepen friendships, everything basically got better. Improved more when I implemented what I'm going to share with you in this video. So first of all, we need to understand what's the old pattern. What are the patterns, the behavioral patterns that are limiting you? This is commonly known as nice guy syndrome, what I'm going to be talking about here. This term comes from the work of Dr. Robert Glover, who wrote the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, which I highly recommend that you read. Basically, this pattern is where men use this mask of just being nice, like, oh, I'm just really nice and I just want you to like me and I'll do whatever it takes for her to like me. And there's a huge difference between being a nice guy and being a genuine kind person. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being kind. I think kindness is a virtue, but there's a difference between that and having this front of using niceness as a way to avoid any sort of conflict, okay? And this is where we really get into the meat of this. But this pattern arose from childhood. Because when we're children, we're developing our perceptions around the world. We're developing our belief systems and if I act like this, I get this result. If I act like this, I get that result. So we start to shape a lot of our identity and our behavioral patterns at a very young age. The most common pattern being that as a baby, you were crying, you didn't get picked up and held quickly enough, right? Or you were hungry, you didn't get fed immediately. And obviously our parents loved us. Hopefully that was the case, right? It's not like they didn't care about you. It's just, maybe they were busy doing something. Or what's also very common is having a father who is absent, because he's at work, he's at his job all day, he's gone all the time. So these really actual simple childhood experiences that wouldn't seem like much to us now thinking about them. At a young age, these can have a big impact on us. And the most common thing, if you got in trouble as a child, if your mother yelled at you, your father yelled at you, got spanked, whatever it is, we start to associate that as something dangerous because, oh shit, my mom got mad at me. If I make her mad again, she may not feed me and I won't survive. So I have to make sure she's happy with me so that I keep getting fed. Now, obviously this is ridiculous and probably not true for the vast majority of people at least, but we don't know that when we're children. And so we start to shape our behavior in a way that makes sure we will not upset our parents initially. And then this becomes simply how we react to, sometimes it's just towards women, sometimes it's just towards men. There's often a bit of both, like I act this way towards women and this way towards men. So what we often end up doing is we become people pleasers. This behavior extends, we go to school and we have teachers. Maybe you get in more trouble at school, get yelled at. And if you're like me, you caused a ruckus in your teenage years in school. And after enough times going to the principal's office, parents being called, being shamed, blah, 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 you develop this, okay, I have to be nice, I have to please the teacher, I have to please my parents. And then what happens for men is they get into their dating life. It's like, I have to please this woman. I have to be nice to her. I have to make sure she likes me and validates me. And I need her approval. I need the people around me's approval to make sure that they feel okay about me. I don't feel safe unless I have the approval of others. Again, completely ridiculous. But from the context of being a child who thinks you're going to die if you're not approved by your parents, it makes sense why we would have these behaviors. And I'm going to get into these behavior patterns, what this really looks like. But what this does is it creates a very unstable core identity. You don't feel safe being who you are. It creates this feeling of there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. I've done something wrong and I can't let anyone find out about who I really am. Maybe that resonates with you. If you really think about it, do you have this voice in your head telling you often like you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, they don't like you, they don't like the thing you said? Because I can tell you this was happening in my head 24/7 when I was younger in life. You know, up until I started becoming aware of this only 4 or 5 years ago. I was like, oh shit, this is a very destructive pattern. So an interesting thing, because I'm heavily into Taoist philosophy, I'm a cultivator. In Taoism, Taoist cosmology, Chinese medicine, your core identity is earth element. Earth is the center of all the elements. You know, in Chinese medicine, the elements are water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. So earth is at the center, and it's your core structure. And a lot of people in the modern world have very weak earth element. They have very weak earth, a very weak core identity. And what this does is it causes them to try to create this identity based on external circumstances, things that they feel that they control. Because when you have this weak identity, you feel like you have no control. You start to create an external based identity. It's like, well, if I put these certain clothes on, if my body looks a certain way, if I say just the right things, whatever it is. A very common thing is, well, if I have these certain accomplishments, like I have this certain career or this certain skill, and I'm always like making sure people know about it. These are these external based identity factors. But guess what? None of those are you. You're not the things that you wear. You're not the things that you have accomplished. You're not your career. You simply are you. And before we move on, the first thing I want you to do is say to yourself right now, I deserve to be here simply for who I am. I deserve love. I deserve success and abundance simply because I am. Simply because I am. So when you can embody that at a core level, simply accepting that, you know what, I'm okay just being who I am. It's not the external things. It's simply me as a person. If you can truly embody that, all these things happen naturally, okay? But I know that's a difficult thing, but something I just want you to think about, all of this really comes down to self-love. Loving yourself, accepting yourself, being confident in who you are, your life, your path that you're on, not having to mold that for anyone else, not having to shrink yourself to like try to please everyone else. That's kind of the core thing. So let's break into some specific patterns that what these typically looks like, all right? The number one thing is timidity, being very timid. This means that you're afraid to speak your mind. You're afraid to tell the truth often, how you really feel. You're afraid to stand out is what it really is. You're afraid to be seen for who you truly are. And so you'll be very quiet or you'll just say what you think people want to hear. Which brings us right into people pleasing, which I've already talked about. People pleasing is molding your behavior so that other people around you approve of you. Or at least you feel like they're going to approve of you, so you shape your behavior in that way. You fabricate the things that you say, you contrive the way that you act, etc. Like, have you ever noticed that you act a certain way around some people and you act a different way around others? Maybe you act a completely different way when you're by yourself. What I used to do, and I noticed this in some of my friends sometimes, whereas like, you know, I would act one way, I have a certain personality pattern, but when I'd be around women who I was maybe a little bit attracted to, I would completely get really stiff and like really contrive my behavior. Or maybe I try to say things that I thought would impress them, which is all just, you know, it's not being real. It's not being authentic. You know what I mean? So people pleasing is at the core of nice guy patterns. Indirectness. This is where it really shows up in relationships, is being indirect. For example, I give this example a lot, but I think it's very valid. It's like, if you're in a relationship with someone, this is more common as you move into a more long-term relationship, right? Once you get past the honeymoon phase and you want to initiate sex, but you're kind of afraid of being rejected maybe. And so you go about it in a very indirect way. I used to do this myself. I would like just start massaging my partner's shoulders. In my mind, I was like, well, if I do this for her, then she feels like, oh, this is so nice. He's doing this for me. You know what? I'm just going to initiate sex with him. It's like I wanted my partner to initiate sex with me because I was afraid to be direct with it, which is ridiculous, completely ridiculous. And that pattern actually prevented me from having sex, because women can feel when you have the agenda and you're not being clear with it. They can feel it. Of course, this just shows up in social dynamics as well. When you're being very ambiguous, you don't want people to know who you truly are, it shows up. So indirectness is another pattern. And this often shows up as silent contracts as well. Kind of what I just mentioned, where massaging her shoulders, hoping that she would initiate sex. I created the silent contract in my mind. And it went something like this: if I do something nice for her, then she must have sex with me. Like, I gave her something, now she needs to give me something. And when it didn't happen, which it usually didn't with the silent contracts, I felt disappointed, and I would get, resentful and ignore her and things like that. Very toxic, but very common behavioral pattern, passive aggressiveness, things like that. And then the fear of failing. And I think this goes right with everything I've been talking about. A lot of nice guys, they avoid doing things because they're afraid they'll fail. I think dating is an obvious area that this shows up. I'm afraid of approaching and talking to the woman because I may be rejected. Yeah, you may be, but you also may get her phone number, go on a date with her. So it's like, at least you'll know either way versus dragging it out and being indirect. So fear of failing. This may also look like men who they don't pursue the career that they want to. They don't live the lifestyle that they want to because they're afraid that they'll fail. And let me tell you, this specific circumstance was never too much of an issue for me, because my favorite thing to do was quit a job that I hated and do something I actually wanted to do. For example, in 2018, when I first launched my Multi-Orgasmic Man program, I made more money in a week than I used to make in a year. And my mind was blown. And at that point, I had a pretty desirable job, actually. I was working as a composer for a video game company, which was really cool, but there was still just a lot of things I didn't like about the schedule and having to be on Zoom calls 24/7 because the company was based in Asia, all these things. I made a leap for it. I was like, I want to be free. I was fully jumping 100% into being an entrepreneur, into being self-employed. And I was like, you know what? I don't know 100% where this is going to end up, but I'm going to do it. And what people who have a fear of failing do in a situation is they say, you know what? I'm not even going to try. What if I fail? I'm just going to stay what's safe. So a lot of this is staying in this comfort zone. You've created this little bubble of nice guy habits that make you feel safe and comfortable and reinforce this identity, this actually really shrunken identity that you have, and you get stuck in it. So now let's talk about stepping into your masculine pattern. And remember, I want you to really think about this as having a strong core identity, which isn't about external things. It's not about accomplishments. It's not about clothes you wear. Sometimes these can help reinforce, for sure, but you don't want to rely on these things. Ultimately, this is about self-love, self-acceptance, being like, you know what? I'm okay with myself. I'm okay with who I am. I love myself. I accept myself, and that's all I need. And if you embody that, then all this is going to happen on its own. But I think it's helpful to give you some specific things that you can start to be aware of in how you're presenting yourself to the world. The first thing is boldness. The opposite of timidity is boldness. Being okay with standing out. Being okay with being heard by speaking your mind. Because what nice guys typically want to do, they want to blend in. They want to be invisible. They don't want to be seen or really stand out in any way. So they make themselves quieter. They make themselves more neutral. They just try to be like everyone else around them so they don't stand out. Well, when you start being bold, this is really about you embracing your uniqueness, your beliefs, your desires, where you want to go in life, etc. It's about not letting things stand in your way. For example, in dating, it's a great example. It's easier to not approach the woman, to not have the conversation with the woman. The more bold thing to do is to go up to the woman and talk to her. And this is becoming an increasingly rare behavior for men, and it's going to make you stand out that much more. Anything that you're doing in life, when you do things boldly, without fear, without being afraid of what people are going to think about you, the more confident you're actually going to become. At first, it's going to be frightening. It's going to be scary. But once you do that, you realize, oh, I'm not going to die by simply speaking my mind or whatever. Then you start to reinforce those behavior patterns. And guess what? This type of behavior actually boosts your testosterone. Being bold, being assertive, allowing yourself to be who you are, you become a man, okay? Prioritizing your needs. This one is very important. What very commonly happens in men's situation, especially in long-term relationships, is they get into these people-pleasing patterns. When you have certain boundaries, when you have certain needs, for example, if you're in a relationship and sex is drying up, it's up to you to change that. You can't just wait and keep using indirect behavior. I can think of a few men I've known in my life who were in incredibly toxic dynamics with women, where the woman's spending all of his money and not letting him hang out with his friends, mentally, emotionally, sometimes even physically abusing them. And they remain in these relationships. And it's bro, what are you doing? What are you doing? What usually happens is there's this putting someone else's needs above your own. Like, well, if my sexual desire is inconvenient to my partner, then I better just, only have sex when she feels like it once a month. Like, life is too short to have a bad sex life, okay? That's always been my philosophy. So prioritize your needs. And another thing here, you can't rely on one person to fulfill all of your needs. I'm not saying you need to be polyamorous. What I mean by this is that there's certain needs men have. For example, emotional connection. You can't get 100% of your emotional fulfillment from your romantic partner. You need to have friends. You need to have intimate, vulnerable relationships with other men in your life. Like genuinely having conversations, hanging out with bros, talking about this is what's going on in my life, these are some challenges I'm having. It really changes things. So what I really mean by prioritizing your needs is if you need sex, make sure that you create it, okay? If you're feeling constricted in your relationship, you need to get out. You need to get out into the world. You need to hang out with other people, travel, have friendships. It's so important that you do not make one person the center of your entire life. What's really made my current relationship much different than any other relationship I've been in, and this has been a very long-term relationship, is that I never quite lost the mindset of being single in a certain sense. Because what I see so many men get into is like, well, I don't know, I'll have to ask the wife. I gotta ask, I don't know if she'll let me. Like, what? I never stopped doing all the things I wanted to do. And what it really came down to was I wasn't going to tolerate being with someone who had any sort of like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's not how a relationship should be, bro. Not my opinion, okay? Prioritize your needs, love yourself, take care of yourself. Don't rely on one person to do everything for you. You know what I mean? So you gotta take a vacation, go travel, have some chill time, whatever it is. Like, enjoy yourself. Directness, extremely important. Don't be ambiguous, be direct, be upfront, be honest. If you're unsatisfied with the dynamic in your relationship, you must communicate that. Now, it's important you don't frame this in a way where you make everything your partner's fault. Humans love to do this, right? Both men and women love to do this, but it never feels good in that sense. So just saying, hey, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like sex has become a rare thing. That's not acceptable for me. Sex is an extremely important part of a relationship for me. So I need to change that dynamic. Things like this. So just being very direct. You can't beat around the bush and stay in these like indirectness and silent contracts. That's what leads men to be stuck in these miserable relationships for a long time. You don't have to have that dynamic. And I think part of coming back to boldness is knowing when it's time to walk away. Some relationships can be salvaged, and some have started with such a toxic dynamic that they cannot be. And that's when you have to be bold enough to know when it's time to walk away. I think directness is also just being real, being who you truly are. With these people-pleasing patterns, a lot of men they're wearing a mask. They're putting on this front of being something that they're not. This actually prevents them from having fulfilling relationships with others. It makes you feel lonely and isolated all the time because you're afraid of people, kind of finding out who you are, which is actually who you are as a cool person. You're actually a really cool person. You may not realize it, right? And you have this illusion that there's something wrong with you when there's nothing wrong with you. You're just a human being, okay? And when you can open yourself back up and just connect with people, be real, it's going to bring you a lot more fulfillment, socially, romantically, sexually, everything. Being willing to fail. This is really part of being bold. And I think sex is a good example of this. Premature ejaculation is very strongly often a nice guy pattern. It's from people pleasing. Like, if she isn't happy with my sexual performance, then she's gonna be upset with me, and someone else being upset with me is completely unacceptable because my identity is shaped around how other people feel about me. You know what I mean? And when you let go of that, and you're like, you know what? Maybe I'll fail. Like, maybe when I have sex with this woman, maybe I'll ejaculate quickly. Whatever, you do it anyway. You know what I mean? There's an acceptance there. There's an acceptance of, if I get out of my comfort zone, things may not go well. It's like the saying is, a successful person has failed more than the average person will ever try. To live a life you truly want to have, to live your dream life, you have to take some risks. And you're going to fail sometimes. And guess what? I personally tend to learn more from my failures than anything else. It's like, okay, now I know what not to do. And I would say that's the reason I'm here sharing this with you today. Everything I share is because I've failed a lot on my journey. I spent years and years doing what you should not do, so that now I can tell you, hey, don't do this instead, okay? So it could save you some time if you listen to some of the things I say and implement them. Remember, all of this is simply having a core acceptance of, I accept myself, I love myself, I'm just gonna be me. I don't need to mold my behavior to fix anyone else. All of this leads to confidence. Confidence in your daily life, confidence in social situations and work and career and pursuing bigger things than you may have allowed yourself to pursue in the past. Confidence with women, because women want a man who's bold. They want a man who can lead them, be direct, sexually direct with them in, proper consent and dynamics, etc. So I hope you've gotten something from this. The next thing I recommend that you do is watch a video I made which explains behavioral patterns that will actually boost your testosterone. So it's gonna be a lot more of what you heard in this video, but even even more nuanced into how you can apply these things into your life. So check that video out, there's a link to it. Share this with a friend who's a nice guy who needs to hear this message. Make sure you give this video a like. Have a great day, my friends.